Valencia lights were supposed to feel like celebration. MotoGP closing ceremony, champions lined up, legends on screen, the whole sport pretending it's one big happy family. But the crowd? The crowd had other plans. The moment Valentino Rossi's face flickered across the screen, the jeers hit like a storm, ripping through metal sheets. A decade has passed since Sepang 2015, and yet the echoes haven't aged a day. Rossi wasn't even on the grid anymore. He wasn't fighting for a title, wasn't battling Marc Marquez through the S's, wasn't trying to recreate 2008. He was somewhere else, watching endurance racing lap times and nurturing VR46's pipeline. But his fan base? They arrived like an army that never signed a peace treaty. They turned a prize-giving ceremony into a courtroom, and Rossi's face became the trigger. You know what the crowd expected? They expected Marc to smirk. They expected him to enjoy the theater. They expected him to throw the same energy he received in Mugello and Misano, where the Italian stands vibrated with hate and history. But instead, Marc Marquez stepped into the spotlight and did something that shut the entire hall down. He told them to respect everyone. No theatrics, no counter shots, no subtle digs, just one line, delivered like a general who has seen too many pointless wars. The only thing I can say is please respect everyone. No response, no applause for sportsmanship, no moment of reflection. The crowd ignored the message and instead roared Marc's name. Not because they learned anything, not because peace suddenly bloomed in the arena, but because maturity stings people who thrive on chaos. Marc didn't win the crowd, he rose above them. And that's the story today. The man who was hunted has become the man who refuses to hunt back. Where Italy booed him, he walked forward. Where Misano tried to break him, he kept his helmet on and his chin high. Where Mugello roared hate, he delivered race pace instead of pettiness. And when Valencia booed Rossi, he did what Rossi never did for him. He defended the idea of respect. So the hook is this: when the rider who was villainized acts with more class than the hero ever did, who does history eventually side with? Comment your first instinct. Rewind the calendar. 2024, Mugello. Italians filling the hills like armies in old epics. Marc Marquez steps onto the stage and gets drowned in a wave of noise that feels like a living creature. Not boos, not hisses, something worse. Something that felt rehearsed, generational, inherited. The kind of hatred that outlives its origin story. Marc didn't flinch, he didn't mock them, he didn't react. He walked to his bike, did his job, took his points, answered the media, and left. They tried to drag him into the past. He refused to go back. Then Misano, the so-called home of Rossi. The theater of yellow smoke. The birthplace of banners that were more statement than support. Marc arrived, did his laps, won his sprint, walked past the noise, and handled it with the composure of a man who has been baptized in something harder than hate. Every insult thrown at him reflected off like rain hitting steel. Not once did he turn around and weaponize the moment. Not once did he play into the feud. Not once did he return the energy. Then the 2020-25 season happened. Marc delivered the greatest modern comeback MotoGP has seen. 11 GP wins, 14 sprint wins, a 9th world title sealed before the Asian flyaways even finished. And through all of it, fans booed him in cities painted for Rossi. They tried to relive 2015 like it was an open wound. But something had changed. Marc Marquez wasn't the 22-year-old torpedo kid anymore. He wasn't fighting Rossi fans. He wasn't chasing validation. He wasn't trying to win a popularity contest. Fame no longer mattered. Legacy did. And legacy isn't shaped by hate. It's shaped by what you do when hate tries to shape you. People don't realize how loud his silence was. All year, Rossi's camp's subtle jabs. Migno said Rossi would never forgive him. Old interview clips went viral. VR46 insiders kept feeding interpretations of 2015. And yet, Marc didn't take the bait. He didn't throw shade. He didn't bite back. He said the simplest truth: I don't need him. Not arrogance, freedom. Then Valencia came, and suddenly the world flipped. Rossi finally got booed, and instead of enjoying it, Marc defended him. He defended the man whose fans spent 10 years trying to tear him down. You don't do that unless you've grown beyond the war. Meanwhile, Rossi? There are clips all over the internet. Mugello 2018, Misano 2016. Situations where Marc was booed and Rossi allowed it, even smirked. Not maliciously, not cruelly, but with the self-awareness of a man who understood crowd psychology and played into it. Rossi was always a showman. He lived for the theater. Marc stopped caring for the theater. He started caring for the sport. That's the difference. And that's why the Valencia moment hit so hard. It exposed the maturity gap. Marc protected someone who never protected him. So here's the burning question that pushes us into the battlefield. Did Marc finally become the moral winner of a feud he supposedly lost? Or is the past still too heavy for that truth to settle? Comment your take. To understand how Valencia became a turning point, you have to understand why the boos existed in the first place. This wasn't about Sunday. This wasn't about helmets or liveries or new Ducati storylines. This was 10 years of myth-making exploding inside one hall. Rossi fans treated 2015 as scripture. The kick, the penalty, the accusations, the belief that Marc torpedoed a title he wasn't even fighting for. Whether you believe it or not, that belief became religion in Italy. And religion doesn't fade with time. It becomes heritage. Parents passed the story to kids. Misano crowds passed it to newcomers. Mugello stands past it to tourists. And by 2025, booing Marc wasn't outrage. It was ritual. So every time Marc walked into Italian territory, he wasn't fighting a rider. He was fighting a culture. In Mugello, the boos came before the bikes warmed up. In Misano, they came even when he wasn't on the podium. At some races, every camera angle with Marc included a soundtrack of disapproval. But he never reacted. Not because he didn't feel it, but because his priorities changed. He was no longer the kid who wanted to be loved. He was the elder statesman who wanted to win. Then something unbelievable happened. MotoGP's center of gravity shifted. Marc became the benchmark again. He took the GP25 and bent it to his will. Pecco Bagnaia fell apart on the same bike. The Ducati hierarchy that once belonged to Rossi's shade now belonged to Marc. Every headline, every title, every stat, every storyline. And this annoyed the Rossi tribe even more. Because they were watching the rider, they swore to hate reclaim the throne they believed was once stolen from their hero. They booed him more, they hissed louder, they tried harder to drown him. But Marc, the man who endured Mugello and Misano and their unfiltered storms, showed up in Valencia and did the one thing Rossi fans never expected. He asked the world to respect Valentino. Even more brutal? The crowd ignored him. He stood there defending Rossi, saying the words Rossi's camp never said for him. And they cheered Marc instead of listening. That wasn't support. That was irony punching itself in the face. The same fans who wanted Marc to mock Rossi watched Marc rise above them. The same fans who glorified Rossi's showmanship saw Marc demonstrate a higher form of sportsmanship. The same narrative that made Marc the villain suddenly flipped on itself. Because you don't boo a retired legend. You don't disrespect a face that built half the audience in that hall. You don't turn MotoGP history into a weapon. And Marc knew that. His voice didn't tremble, he didn't crack, he didn't pause. He simply said, respect everyone. The boos kept going. The cheers came next. Not for respect, but for Marc. Because moments like that change how people see you. That is the battlefield truth. Marc Marquez walked into a hall full of noise and walked out with a different kind of victory. The kind that doesn't show on lap charts. The kind that doesn't appear in timesheets. The kind that only appears when a man proves he's bigger than the hate thrown at him. When one rider keeps evolving while the other rider's legacy is frozen in hostility, who actually won the war that never officially ended? Comment your verdict. The collapse wasn't Marc's. It wasn't even Rossi's. It was the collapse of an illusion. For years, the sport believed that the feud stayed alive because two titans refused to move on. But the reality is clearer now than ever. Only one side stayed in 2015. Rossi's fan base. Not Rossi. Not Marc. The fan base. When Rossi got booed in Valencia, something broke. Because the whole world expected the opposite. They expected unwavering support, even worship. Instead, they saw that time erodes every kingdom, even the biggest one MotoGP has ever witnessed. The same way Rossi's magic slowly turned into nostalgia, the same way Marc's chaos slowly turned into experience, the same way hate grew old while the riders grew up. Valencia didn't expose disrespect, it exposed change. The new generation cheers Marc because he represents the present. The older generation booed Marc because he rewrote their past. The middle generation booed Rossi because they only know him as a logo on a cap. It was no longer personal, it was general decay. And Marc, for the first time, stood above it. He didn't smile, he didn't react. He didn't enjoy Rossi getting booed the way Rossi once enjoyed crowds turning on Marc. He defended the man. And in that moment, the feud died. Not because Rossi forgave Marc, not because Marc needed forgiveness, but because Marc stopped playing the game the fans kept replaying. He grew up. They didn't. This is the collapse. The crowd revealed that the feud that they think they're fueling is a fire that exists only in their heads. The riders no longer feed it. Only the echoes do, and echoes eventually fade. When one rider becomes more mature than the fan base that once idolized his rival, does the rivalry still deserve to be called alive? Comment your fire. Let's cut the emotion and speak in cold numbers and legacy. Marc Marquez has matched Rossi's 9 titles. He is 1 Ducati championship away from surpassing him in premier class records. He has more poles, more sprints, more wins per season, more comeback seasons, more insane peaks. But Rossi has what Marc never asked for: popularity. Yet here's the twist. Respect lasts longer than popularity. Popularity builds a moment. Respect builds a legacy. Popularity fades when the rider retires. Respect grows when the rider matures. And in 2025, Marc Marquez turned into something people didn't expect: a mentor, a statesman, a man who speaks with gravity instead of impulse. He doesn't stir the crowd. He doesn't fan the flames. He doesn't replay the past. He doesn't respond to boos with smirks. He breaks the cycle. Rossi will forever be an icon, no argument. But Marc is becoming something equally powerful: a leader. He's not trying to replace Rossi. He's not trying to erase him. He's simply building a different legacy. Less theater, more truth. Less drama, more grit. Less nostalgia, more evolution. And this sets up the final uncomfortable question MotoGP fans avoid. If maturity defines long-term legacy, and Marc now carries more of it than Rossi ever did during conflict, who does history eventually respect more? From now, where does this put them? The time will tell us. Comment below. Subscribe for more savage breakdowns.